Hello, Hockey World. It is Thursday, April 27th, 2023.
I'm Michael Agello from a very nervous Toronto.
I'm Kevin Allen.
I am Eklund from a rather placid Pennsylvania. And you're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday, including on the comings and the goings in the hockey world. And wow. So, Mike, we got to start. You know, you're up there in Toronto. I'm sorry you're still eating, but
No, I'm not. I'm done.
Yeah, the what is the vibe around the city? Like, you know, this I would think it would be pretty excited.
Oh, it's excited, but it's nervous. I mean, I took the GO train up from Burlington. I was, went to get coffee at Tim Hortons, did the Canadian trail.
Yeah.
And people saw me wearing my badge, my Leaf credential, or PHW, and I started talking with a few people, and they said, well, we're hopeful that the Leafs win, but we're nervous about it.
Yeah.
And really, that's talking to people in the building, talking to people around town. I'm not talking to everybody, but I got the feeling of nervousness, and that's like, okay, I get that, and
well, of course, yeah. I mean, it's been a while.
Thankfully, the players seem to have the right message and said all the right things. Sheldon Keefe talked about blocking out like the noise around the city, but how tough is that? Ryan O'Reilly talked about the same thing, but then he talked to his dad, and his dad is a big Leaf fan, and so he there's no avoiding it. Mark Giordano is from Toronto. His family is from Toronto. He hears, so you can block it out a little bit, but you can't block all of it out. And that's the thing. It's like there is a nervous anticipation of them ending, 19 years of playoff and seasonal futility. But I think that they're along the same lines as I sort of have expressed on the show. They'll believe it when they see it, but until they see it, they won't believe it.
It's interesting, Kevin. Like, and I get that. Like, obviously, it's been a long time. I mean, when you think about, if everybody out there thinks about their team, and when you have actually gone to the playoffs, it's one thing. It's exciting when you go to the playoffs. It's another thing when you win a playoff round. Mm-hmm. That's a whole other thing, because now, wow, wait a second, we're one of the final 8. Kevin, it is interesting that like that city is unique in some ways. Perhaps maybe like only Montreal, or I guess some of the Western Canadian cities can have that, where the players have come back there to kind of fix this in some ways. Like, not fix it, but you know what I mean? Like, there's guys who are there because they want to change this.
Yeah, I mean, John Tavares was signed there because he wanted to, he grew up, rooting for the Maple Leafs, and there's an understanding of the whole Toronto Maple Leafs aura. Like, I get why they would be nervous about that. Yeah. My read on it's completely different. Talking to people around the league, the story for them is that the Lightning have not looked like the Lightning in any of the games. Right. And by that, what it means is, the inability to sustain a level of play.
Yeah.
And, some of it is injury. But most of it is simply the erosion over time of their depth. And, this is not the team that the Maple Leafs, I think, are going to beat here is not the Lightning team that we saw get to the finals in 3 years. I mean, we started to see that this season. And I'd said before, and I've been saying on radio, is almost when at the trade deadline, they went for the Hail Mary pass. They decided to change their strategy. I think it was Mike that sort of identified it, where, they were going to go out and try to hang the Maple Leafs because they knew.
Lost Kevin for a second there.
Yeah, no. What are you saying? And they went and they made the 5 draft pick and Cal Foote trade for Tanner Jeannot, right? Because Jeannot was making less than $1 million, and that was sort of a Hail Mary move. And what Kevin was referring to is their bottom 6 was highly intimidative. With Belmar and Maroon and Perry, and So they were going to go down that road because I think that they thought that was going to be successful. And to a point, Kevin, their ability to sort of try to get underneath the Leafs' skin has worked in the sense that they've drawn them into penalties. They drew Michael Bunting into a 3-game suspension, but the Leafs and I have to say, like I've said on previous shows, Kevin's right that they haven't been able to sustain 60 minutes, but in 3 of the 4 games, they have, if you take like from point A to point B, they have played more quality minutes and they have dominated at times, but they can't finish. And the Leafs have finished in game 3 and finished in game 4. Now, the Toronto players, Kev, they are cognizant of that fact, and they're basically saying the right thing. This is going to have to be to close out this series. They're going to have to perform at their utmost because they realize that there have been gaps in their performances through 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is the Maple Leafs' worst hasn't been as bad as the Lightning's worst.
Right.
There you go.
And it's hard to sustain quality play throughout a playoff series because the other team is doing everything they can to disrupt what you're trying to do. So
along those lines, the Lightning best hasn't been like the Lightning best, when they are dominating.
Well, that's the point I was starting to make before. I think the Lightning realize that they don't have their best anymore, like what they had before. And I think they sort of realized that early in the season, and they were just trying to adjust. Mm-hmm. They were trying to figure out a better way to play because they still have a lot of quality players. I mean, that's why they're dangerous.
Sure.
So they have a bunch of guys, including a quality goalkeeper, who know what to do. There's just not enough of them anymore, and their depth is, dissipated. They just couldn't afford to keep everybody. And, last year, losing Palat, having to trade McDonough, that was almost like a final straw. So, this team just isn't the same team. And, what we're hoping here is that this is a different Maple Leafs team to the point where, they just go the extra mile and get it done. Now, what I would say is I certainly understand the angst of the fans. I mean, we've talked about it before. I live in Detroit and I'm 67 years old and only seen 1 playoff win. Like the Maple Leaf fans, if they were in that regard, would be committing Harry Carey, I think, if that was the case. I mean,
well, it's 56 years that they haven't won a cup, so they can.
Not winning a playoff game is a little bit different. They won 1 playoff game
against Dallas. Yes, I remember.
Yeah. So, but we certainly understand that. We certainly understand the angst, and at some point, which I think it just becomes so ridiculous that you just roll with it at this point. And I think that's what's happening in Detroit. But I do get it. I mean, they want to see it. They got to see it to believe it. That makes sense to me. So. This probably is it tonight.
Well, the interesting thing, Kev, and John Cooper is a wordsmith. He is probably the best coach in terms of crafting a message and dealing with the media in the league, or at least one of the best. And he tried to put a good spin on it and say, well, if we play like 2% better, we can win these games. He's happy with the way his team has performed. Now, I don't know how true that is, but that's what he's saying to the media. He says, I'm happy with the way the team has performed. We just have to play a little better to get past, what Toronto is doing. And he even brought up, he says, well, this is a different team than last year, but we were down 2-0 to the Rangers and 2 goals in game 3 and came back. And, all these instances over the last 3 years. But he said, this isn't the same team. We don't have Palat anymore. We don't have Ruta. We don't have McDonough. So, he's grounded in reality, but he's also trying to put a positive spin on it. And, if there's any coach that can get his team sort of off the mat and, back to Tampa for a game 6, it's Cooper. But it's going to necessitate his players coming up big. And overall, and this is an interesting thing, and I don't know the exact numbers, but the road teams are dominating these series.
Yeah, I mean it's it's the same thing that happened a couple of years ago, but for sure, it was at 60-some% a couple of days ago. So I think it was at 64.6. I remember writing that seems right. And we've had road wins subsequent to that. So
well, I mean, okay, Rangers, Devils, Rangers won 2 in Newark, Devils won 2 at MSG. The series that we're going to talk about when that comes back, Florida and the Bruins, the Panthers are 2-1 at TD Garden, and Boston won both games in Florida. So, everything, it's the Donald Sutherland line from JFK. Black is, or Kevin Costner line, black is white and white is black. It's like,
although it's been like Bob Duff did a piece where he looked this up, and really it's been going on like this for a while. Like it's been 50-50. Like there's basically been no home ice advantage except in game 7s. And it has not been overwhelming even in game 7s. But there has been a slight advantage in game 7s. Otherwise, it really hasn't been. It's really, almost like you're playing neutral site games. And I think that speaks to the parity and the way the game is played now. And you would think it would be more just though with the last line change, but it hasn't been the case.
Well, I think it was Cooper that basically said, what you don't realize, like in the playoffs, I mean, okay, this makes sense. It's a 32-team league, and then all of a sudden you cut from 32 to 16, and the gap between those 16 good teams is not very wide. So, and then they're, it's not like an impossibility for these teams to win on the road. It's like a good team, if they get good goaltending and play good defense, so sort of block out the fan response. And Cooper even said that, sometimes the home response of the fans works against the home teams. I mean, it did in Toronto in game 1 when Tampa scored that early goal, I think a minute and a half into the first period. Scotiabank Arena deflated, and they booed the Leafs after a period. So it's like, sometimes the anticipation, and that's one of the things that I think Toronto has to be concerned about tonight, is the anticipation of success. If all of a sudden early on they don't have it, that nervous energy in terms of it being a positive can turn to a negative really quickly.
Yeah, no, and Cooper's right about the difference. Like, I think, that it was trending in the right direction for the Maple Leafs. But, as I said, the final straws, I think, when they lost Palat, who's a terrific two-way player, and McDonough, who, was very important to their defensive level of play. When they lost both the two, I think that pushed Maple Leafs ahead of Tampa in terms of, the ability to win and to sustain an entire game. Toronto had a bunch of talented players too, but they were behind the Lightning in terms of, at least I thought so, in terms of just an overall team game. Well, that's not true anymore. Like I thought Toronto should have been favored in this series just based on who they were, and that's proven to be accurate. Now, as I always say, though, it's never an absolute. Like if you played this series 10 times over the next 2 months, Toronto wouldn't win every one of them, but they'd certainly win the majority of them.
Yeah, and you have to say that the additions that the Leafs made at the deadline, especially in this series, Luke Schenn providing physicality on the blue line. Ryan O'Reilly has been phenomenal, and we know he's a playoff performer. But even role guys like Noel Chari and Sam Lafferty and Jake McCabe, all the additions that they made at the deadline, and they added, whereas Tampa did not have the room to really add. The only thing that they did was the Jeannot deal. So they sort of shot their wad on one big deal because Jeannot was making less than $1 million, and they could fit him under the cap. But so I mean. It was two different approaches, and I mean we'll see tonight if Kyle Dubas and what he did at the deadline can provide the Leafs something that they haven't had in 19 years. Let's switch to the games last night. I mentioned Bruins-Panthers, and I think the Bruins obviously wanted to finish that series in 5, prevent themselves from having to go down to Florida again and have a tough Panthers team wear on them. But every time, the Panthers, they scored 3 times. The Bruins came back each time to tie the game. And then in overtime, Allmark makes a faux pas that leads to Matthew Tkachuk's goal, and now it's going back to Florida for Game 6. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I've been impressed with Florida. I mean, it's really Matthew Tkachuk leading this team. He has just been the rock on which they are now seem to be built. He's the foundation player. He's the guy carrying the flag, and he's been noticeable every shift out there. So, I'm impressed. I still think Boston's going to win this series, but it's really been. I give the Panthers a lot of credit. They've stuck with them, and they weren't. We know the Bruins weren't going to go 16-0 to win this, so this isn't really all that surprising. This is a high caliber Panthers team that had to play pretty well just to get into the playoffs down the stretch. I think to think that it was going to be anything less than 6 games with the way that the Panthers play probably would have been unrealistic from the start. But the danger of going 6 is it could simply go to Game 7, and once you get to 7, it's a coin flip.
It could be anybody. Yeah, I mean, two observations on the Panthers side. I agree with you with Tkachuk. He's the leader, and he's scary on the ice. I mean, when he does, he can rile teams up. He's exceptional offensively, and he's very physical. What I've noticed is Barkov must be injured because he is not the Barkov that I've seen play over the last few years. Something's wrong. Something's off. He's not been the dominating player a two-way dominating player that he normally is. And, I think it speaks a lot that they're going to Game 6 with him not seeming to be on.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair assessment. And he really has not been the same player since he went out with the illness. And, I don't know. I mean, it could be something physical, or is this just, kind of what happens when, there's a new sheriff in town. Like, Tkachuk is kind of leading this team now. He's almost usurped the power that Barkov had over being able to lift this team. I mean, it isn't purposeful. I mean, it's just kind of evolved that way. And so I wonder, or maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe he's, something's wrong with him. And, but, I think it's got to be hard to have a new guy come in and you're used to kind of doing things your way. And then suddenly everybody's looking at him to sort of set the tone.
Yeah, I mean, he's never struck me as a very vocal leader. And I associate that situation where you have a captain, like say Matt Sundin in Toronto, was not a very vocal guy. And what the Leafs did was they brought in guys who were vocal, like Gary Roberts and Shane Corson, as a support around him. And obviously Tkachuk, when he comes in, he's going to be the guy who's the vocal leader of that team. And you might be right. He's just taking sort of a step back. The other thing was Bobrovsky. You're not going to see Alex Lyon in the rest of this series the way Bobrovsky played in that game last night. He was fantastic.
How about the ending? How about that ending? It was just crazy.
Well, and then making a save with 1 second left.
That's what I mean. The ending, 1 second left ending. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, it was fortunate. Bobrovsky's interesting with Bobrovsky is the way to beat him, having watched him for the Flyers and all these years with Panthers in different situations. The way to beat him is to deke him.
Yeah.
But there was no time left for him to get in to make that deke. And I was thinking to myself as he's
that's a good question. I wanted to ask you as a guy that's actually played the position before. But I was watching that, and I felt he was going to stop it because it was so. I always think, obviously the goalie has the advantage in a breakaway, but when it's quick and it's just reactions for both players, I always think that the goalie has even a bigger advantage.
It's interesting you say that. Yeah, you do, but you also have a bigger advantage the further out the puck is from you because you can play it, you can come out more and play the angle more, and if the player shifts it, the famous Matthew shift where he brings his stick in and shoots like that,
right?
It doesn't matter as much if he's 15 feet away from you, but if he's 5 feet away from you, that's a big shift, right? Yeah. So
yeah,
what and if you look where Bobrovsky was when he makes that save, he's about 2 or 3 feet in front of the crease. Like he realizes, and that is the way you defend a breakaway anyway, right? Is you come out and you move back in as the player comes. Like a goalie, you come out and cut the angle so they can't take that early shot. Then you skate backwards with him as he comes closer.
The funny thing is that after he made that save on Marchand, he kicked out the right pad, and the puck I think went off the Florida defenseman. It almost came back. It was like yeah. So I mean, and I've seen some weird goals, but the goal that Boston tied it on, where basically it was like two. Oh no! I'm sorry. I was thinking at the other game, in the Colorado Seattle game, where the goal that made it 3-2. It was like a pinball. It went off one guy, it went off another guy, and then it was going 5 feet wide, and then it hits off the defenseman Alexiak and goes into the goal. So I've never seen it more bizarre.
The most amazing goal last night, though, Mike, was the first goal that Duclair scores in that game.
Yes,
that because the pass comes from behind the net. Ullmark does the right thing by putting his stick out and trying to block the pass coming from behind the net. But he angles his stick instead of having his stick square. If he has his stick square, he just blocks that puck back into the corner. Instead, he angles it up, which means the puck deflects up into the air quickly. Now, this is all happening bang, bang, boom. For Duclair to have the presence of mind to be able to swat that out of midair after a deflection that close, it's just like, holy cow! Like what kind of eye and eye coordination does this guy have? That's the kind of thing that if a goalie made a glove save on a deflection that was that close to you, you would be shocked. It was unbelievable.
Well, Kev, the interesting thing about Boston right now is that, I almost get the impression that, I'm sure there was something wrong with Bergeron. Obviously, he sat out the first 4 games. Maybe it was something nagging, and they just said, okay, we can handle Florida without Bergeron for a few games, and let's just make sure he's 100%. But they've been without Bergeron and Krejci. Yeah. And now apparently Krejci is taking the trip down to Florida, and if he's traveling with the team, I would assume he's going to play in Game 6. It's almost like they said, okay, we can beat them without these guys, and now they realize maybe we can't beat them without these guys.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's what we always say, that when these type of situations happen, but I don't think they could play. When you just based on. We've all watched what Bergeron has played with during his career, and it's always, for lack of a better word, icky to hear the kind of injuries and illnesses he's had. So I think they really couldn't play. Like they weren't just saying, well, we can win without him. Because you're basically taking your top 2 centers. What team can take their top 2 centers out and still look as good as
Taylor Hall and MVP suddenly be their top?
Yeah. It's just crazy. So, I agree with your assessment, though. I think if he's going down there, they think he's going to play. Now, things can happen. But, as much as I laud the Panthers for, sticking with Boston, Boston's done nothing other than the fact that I think they could use Pasternak to be more like the past during the regular season. But, like last night, I think he had 3 shots, but no points. He had a bunch of giveaways. So he hasn't been, quite as good as he was in the regular season.
He looks noticeably frustrated, like Pasternak, which is something that I've never really seen a frustrated. Maybe because I watch him mostly playing the Flyers, and he scores 3 to 5 goals a game, but against the Flyers, if you look at the Flyers and the team he beats more than anyone else.
Yeah.
But to see Pasternak frustrated has been shocking in a lot of ways. The one question I have is this: obviously Bergeron's healthy enough to come back, and he's going to play, right? Because he's Bergeron, and if he can play, if you're going to play, you're not going to say you can't play. But I'm reminded of the situation, where when Eric Lindros came back in that famous Game 7 of that series against New Jersey, where he gets knocked out by Scott Stevens, there was a lot of debate going up to that game because the Flyers were playing pretty well against the Devils, and obviously Lindros is Lindros, right? He's your best player, but when you bring him in, does the focus shift? Do players settle in a little bit because Bergeron's back, and I wondered that a little bit last time when I was watching it. There was definitely Hall wasn't as great as Hall's been, maybe I'm wrong, but
that sounds like the Laidlaw argument that I always get into it with him.
Really?
Because, last year you talked about, if you remember, Hedman was out, and he started arguing about. He explained that he's been on these teams, and everybody suddenly steps up and playing better. Then the guy comes back
Mm-hmm.
and they expect him to do it all. And so basically I ended up pinning him in the corner saying, so what you're saying is if Edmund's gone, they're a better team without him, and that, obviously that's ridiculous.
But let me counter that argument, Kevin, because you're right. Of course, that's not true. But there is a mental aspect to hockey that there is definitely an all for one, one for all mentality that goes through teams.
Yeah,
that you can't deny.
I'll give you a
little bit. Like when you let up your game, if you're a game ahead in a series, do you let up a little bit? Do you let up a little bit if Bergeron comes back? That little bit of let up, is that enough?
I'll give you an example of this, and of course it's Leaf related. 2002, the Leafs played Carolina in the Eastern Conference Final. They won the first game. This was a team that was decimated by injuries. They had lost Sundin, he was out. Darcy Tucker was out. A number of players. So they win game 1 against Carolina. Game 2, they bring back 5 guys. They bring back Sundin, Tucker, all these guys. They lose 3 straight with the players playing at less than 100%. They ended up winning game 5, then losing in game 6. But the momentum was sort of eliminated. The momentum of that team was sort of eliminated by bringing back all these players and sort of, depending on them to be what Matt Sundin and Darcy Tucker normally were. And they weren't. They were 50 or 60%, but they said, well, we got to get those guys back in there. And I don't know. I mean, if I'm Boston, if Krejci can walk and Bergeron can walk, they're playing.
Well, and you owe it to those guys. You can't tell those guys to sit out if they're healthy.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to argue against your argument in this way, and something I learned from Scotty Bowman. Almost everything impacts your team mentally. Every little thing, and it's always temporary. So because of all that, because you're right, when somebody is gone, everybody plays differently. They have different roles. So when the person comes back, it's almost like they're kind of trying to readjust again to trying to get back. But so many different things, goalie switches affect that. I mean, everything affects that. So because everything does affect it, you might as well, your strategy should always be just get your best players in at all times and just worry about the rest as you go along.
So we're not coming up with some kind of like special gambler thing here that guys in late for a while, Bergeron's returning to the lineup, then you should go against Boston.
And if you end up losing the series and you find out, well, I could have put Bergeron back in, or I could have put
right. Yeah, when you think about it, it does make sense because you could be right. Like in this particular game with Krejci coming back. Right. Everybody could be out of whack, and they might play 30 minutes like that and finally get it together. But in that 30 minutes, they fall behind. And, so like coaches recognize all that. Yeah. But on the other hand, like if you didn't have your best guys in and you lose anyway, then you were thinking, well, what if I had my best guys in? So you might as well lose with your best guys.
Right. I don't think there's a solution to this situation.
No, there isn't. No.
I think you're kind of stuck as a coach. You just have to do what you're saying.
Yeah, but I think ultimately what you decide is, as Scotty used to tell me, is you're going to always go with your best guys. That's
my
the best direction.
The only reason it rings up with Bergeron is, listen, like we know he's played under all kinds of crazy conditions, board, flat jackets, all sorts of things, right? Like in his career, he's done all kinds of nuts and things to play. And so if he's not playing, I'm thinking he's really hurt, right? Like there's something he is absolutely hurt. So to go from really being hurt and then 2 nights later being able to play felt like a little bit like, okay, maybe he's able to play in Bergeron standards, but what if you're up 3-1, why not hold him out, but obviously, they've lost anyway. It doesn't matter. But
well, let's just say this: there were 3 cities that were very happy at the results of that game last night. One was Sunrise, Miami, Fort Lauderdale. The other was Tampa, and the other was Toronto, because having Boston have another game where they go down to Florida and having Radko Gudas and Matthew Tkachuk beat on them. And wear on them and have them a little more tired for the next round, whenever that next round is. Then that's something that I think is deemed as a positive.
It's hard to quantify. I can talk to somebody in Florida to quantify how important it is that there's another home playoff game in Florida. Like it's hard to actually they are literally living penny to penny down there at times, and they're spending to the cap, and their owner wants results because they're spending to the cap, right? So having another playoff game is another couple $1 million, and it's a big deal. Yeah. And so having a home, that's why home ice advantage to them means something, because you're guaranteed probably not to get swept. You're guaranteed 3 home playoff games. When you don't have home ice advantage, you have to go to game 6 to get 3 home playoff games, right? So this is what's happening.
That's another one of those issues that I have often wondered if it's self-fulfilling. I mean, these are finely tuned professional athletes who are conditioned now 12 months out of the year. And yet we talk as if, playing for some of them playing 14, 15 minutes. And is it physical? For sure. But this is what they do for a living, and that it's going to wear them out. And, but we talk about it so much. I wonder if it just, we talk about the mental aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like they've done some crazy studies about how often players get hit in a game, and it's really not that often.
Right.
Like even in playoff games.
Right.
So really the wear and tear on them is more just in terms of, they go hard for 45 seconds for, 18 shifts a game or whatever it is.
Right. And I've talked to players who say, the playoffs are painful, but the adrenaline easily kicks in for it. Like there's easily enough adrenaline to get you through that.
Yeah. But, you need something to talk about.
Yeah, right.
When you're analyzing games. So you talk about things like, schedule. And I mean, I bring this up all the time, but imagine in any other profession, with, a police officer or a heart surgeon or thing, if you said to them, well, man, you got to go 3 days in a row. Like you're going to be tired. And, like it's just when you put it in those terms, it just seems silly.
I mean, I've podcast 3 days in a row now, Kevin. I'm tired.
Yeah, that's got to work.
There's a word for that. It's called a miracle. Now, okay, I have a scenario here, and we know that it's not done because Seattle took the lead in that series, and now they're up 3-2 going back to Seattle. If they win this series, I just looked it up. Vegas swept LA, beat San Jose in 6, and then beat Winnipeg in 5 to get to the Stanley Cup final. I think Seattle beating Colorado could be a bigger upset than any of those 3 series.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair just because they're the defending Stanley Cup champion. Now, always in upsets, you have to have extenuating circumstances. Mm-hmm. Like the loss of Landeskog, who's not only, an important physical presence and goal scorer, but he's their leader. Right. Like, that team is not led by McKinnon.
Right.
So I think that's a big absence. And, they've changed goalies, so the chemistry isn't the way it is. And, we know that they don't have cadre anymore. I mean, there's a lot of factors.
Yeah.
But saying all that, it's still the defending Stanley Cup champion, and they were favored. The Kraken still, and I mean, I talked about this the other day, but their patchwork is different because their patchwork is guys who have had playoff success before.
Right.
So, they're not weaving in a bunch of journeymen who suddenly, pull it all together. But saying all that, I mean, this is really impressive. Like, they're playing hard. And, I mean, like last night's game, they bring up a rookie who's making his NHL debut. I've even forgotten his name.
Ty Cartier from Sault Ste. Marie,
Yeah, and he ends up scoring in his NHL debut, in the playoffs, only the 8th player in the last 97 years to do that, and they put him in. This is the other thing, too, you got to admire about Hackstall. Like, he's playing with their best players. He was a 27-goal scorer down in the AHL. They brought him up. McCann was missing. They plugged him in McCann's line.
Yep.
And he scored. It was a beautiful goal. It was an NHL goal,
Yeah, and I love when coaches do this, when they don't put him on like the third line and move everybody up. I personally am such a big fan of not screwing with all of your lines because one guy's hurt. Like that's.
No, that's what he did. He didn't want to mess up the chemistry, so he just said, he's a scorer. We lost the scorer. I'm going to plug the scorer into the scorer's hole, and we'll see what happens. Now,
and he scored.
Yeah, but how many minutes do you think he played him? Did anybody look this up?
No, I didn't
I'll look it up.
I know what it is. I checked.
Let me guess. I would say about 8.
That's what he played. Yeah, he played 8 minutes, which that's a coach being smart. Didn't overtax them. Whenever they had lead, you got some defensive people in there, and he didn't have to cover someone he was incapable. So they did that. But I love those stories. I mean, and his parents, they had to drive to Toronto, catch a plane that they knew was going to be late for the game.
Right.
But they went anyway because they were only going to miss part of the first period if everything was on time, and we all know how often that happens.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But they did it, and they saw his goal. And of course, because of the way television is, they had the cameras on him when he scored. They got the reaction. It was all over social media. But that's what playoffs are about.
That's what actually those are the kind of stories that end up on team DVDs at the end of the season when it seems successful. You know what I mean? It's that's the kind of thing that ends up the Seattle Kraken's rise to victories this year or whatever. You're going to see those kind of that's going to be on there.
The funny thing is that it was so symbiotic because Jared McCann played his junior at Sault Ste. Marie, and Ty Cartier played his junior at Sault Ste. Marie. He was an undrafted free agent. I think he scored the same amount of goals in the AHL that McCann did in the NHL, and he scores in McCann's place.
Yeah.
But I look, okay, Makar was out of the lineup, so that was definitely a factor. There's something going on with Valerie Nikushkin that we don't know about. They said personal reasons, and we don't know what exactly that means. But Nikushkin is a guy who probably is going to get votes for the Selke this year.
He was arguably their MVP last year.
Yeah, and Makar, we know Makar is one of the best 2 or 3 defense. So they'll get Makar back for Game 6. But I mean, momentum-wise, Kev, it's all in Seattle's favor. So like somebody said in the chat, the game on Friday is going to be out of control there.
Yeah, no, but it's created an appealing series, and there was one other aspect to the Cartier story too, which I really like. They didn't even bring him up because I guess the AHL team was in the area. They were in the playoffs. They didn't bring. He was an AHL player that morning. He was in the NHL playoffs that night.
Wow.
So that just kind of adds, to that. And they brought him up, plugged him in. He didn't have time to think about it. Bernier, who was Beniers, who was one of his, who was his center, had never seen him play that season. So he just had to kind of figure it out.
They probably never met him until
they had met.
This is how new he was. On NHL.com, almost every player, even when they get called up, they have a profile picture on David, they have a Connor McDavid picture. They've got the human cutout.
And a question mark. Like in this, like he's the mystery date. Yeah.
It's Hockey Insider. Yeah. That's who it is.
Well, again, he's undrafted. He was an undrafted free agent. They signed him in March of last year, and he went out. He had, as Mike pointed out, 27 goals or 28 goals, and had a great season. Won the Dudley Garrett Award as the leading rookie scorer in the AHL, and did his thing. And the thing about it is there's discussion. McCann may be back for 6, so he could be back down in the AHL playoffs. One and done.
But that's he'll be they got to bring him in for the parade, right? That kind of thing.
What if he doesn't? I think if you appear, you'd have to be voted in. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, but I was just going to say Kyle Dubas must be slipping because this guy scored 45 goals for the Sioux. There's everybody who's ever played for the Sioux is on the Maple Leafs except for this guy. He scored 45 goals with the Sioux last year, and they didn't sign him, but Seattle did. So,
it's a great story. But just getting back to I think Hackstall has done a really good job of just preparing this team. I think he looked. And this is always the great argument. Do you coach a team with whatever your style is? Hitchcock coached one way.
Yeah.
Or do you look at the players and coach, the team based on what you got? Yeah. And Hackstall, I think, is sort of right in the middle of that. I think he understood he had players who had won before, therefore knew what to do once they got in the playoffs. but he has a certain style as well, and I think he's sort of got a hybrid that seems to have worked. So
the thing about it, I wasn't a huge fan of him in Philly, but the one thing when I first interviewed him, when he first came in, he said something that I think is pertinent now. And that is, I said, you're dealing, you're meeting a lot of players at once here. You're going into a situation where this coach, no one really knows you. Like one player is from one player went to University of North Dakota on this team. I think at that point we talked about let's say Vanderlei or whatever it was.
Van de Velde.
Yeah. Van de Velde. So and he said, well, as a college coach, that's what we get every year. He's like, I get new players every year. I've got to figure out how it works every year. That's what we do. And I think that has benefited him as an expansion coach. Like I think an expansion coach versus college coaches do have that. There's no baggage. A college team just comes in; they're all new for the most part. Maybe a couple guys. The best players leave all the time. He said, your best players are gone, so they're not going to be coming back for the most part. And you got new guys all the time.
Well,
there is. We need to go back to the NHL playoffs, but let me just segue just because you talked about college and it made me think of this because I wanted to talk about this. I just saw that in the college football, there's 2,000 players in the portal. Now, my question of that is if this starts to happen more in college hockey, what is going to be the impact on that? If we're just see kids, just playing, for 3 different schools in 4 years, and what's going to be like? How will this be? Imagine. If we had this is what the hope was that free agency was going to be like. Because this is free agency,
right?
But in the NHL, and instead everybody kept their players, and we have almost no one.
Yeah, it's very controversial in college hockey the last couple of years. This whole new concept where players can leave teams and go to a team so easily. That's been very controversial. And I know a lot of people say Quinnipiac was made up of players. A couple of their key players came from other places.
Well, that could be the effect. You could say it's going to have the effect of like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, those teams all being like ridiculous superstar teams. But if you could have like smaller teams like Quinnipiac or Cornell or something like that, getting a bunch of players and having a chance to win. So, I think it's a bit chaotic, but it'll be interesting how that unfolds.
What happens a lot though is if you're a superstar type player in college and you want to be like a first line player and you're behind 2 guys that are like draft picks or whatever, really good. That's what happens with a lot of these guys. They end up being like, okay, I'm not getting an opportunity here, so I'm going to go someplace else.
Well, just one more thing about Seattle, Colorado before we talk about tonight's games. The interesting dichotomy. Marc-Andre Fleury in 2018, he wasn't Clark Kent. He was Superman. It was the best goaltending performance I had seen in the playoffs since Dominik Hasek in '99.
Yeah.
So, he basically carried that team to a Stanley Cup final.
For sure.
In this series, the motivation here, Grubauer, I think everybody agrees he's an average goaltender at best. He got a big contract from Seattle. He probably was overpaid. But there's a motivation there, Kev, because maybe it was a slight that Colorado decided not to sign him, and he's sticking it to his old team. And I think that's the motivation here, and that's why he played really well last night.
Yeah, he has played well, but I've seen those games, and I've also been reading kind of what they've been talking about, and what they're talking about is how well Seattle is defending.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to discount the fact that he's been good and that maybe he wants to stick it to his team. Not at all, but I'm just saying, sometimes it feels like a goalie series and sometimes it feels like a defensive series.
Yeah.
This feels to me like a team being hard to play against series.
Yeah, this is definitely not a goalie series.
Like Seattle has just been hard to play against. You can't get through them. They seem to be everywhere. And again, I think it's that group of players that have been in the playoffs who know how to play in the postseason. So,
is this if they upset? What would be a bigger upset? Seattle upsetting Colorado or Florida upsetting Boston?
Florida.
Well, I think you got to say Florida only because Boston won 65 games. But right. I'm not discounting because I think Mike's right on. Like that, this would be an amazing upset.
Yeah. I think that I wonder who. I think that more people probably pick Seattle than pick Florida in the series. But when you look at it back, I was looking what's the biggest upset. I kind of look at it that way. Look at who were picked. Not many people pick Seattle at all. I
No.
really one person picked Florida. I heard one person pick Seattle, or Anthony picked Seattle.
Yeah, Anthony looks like he's
that's the only one
a genius.
I've heard the only person I heard pick Seattle. So yeah, that's kind of crazy.
And believe me, that's a stretch to call Anthony a genius.
Yeah, I mean, I never paid attention to him, but a wise old sports writer told me years ago, nobody will remember you if you take the favorites. So
that's really true.
Even if you don't believe, just pick some upsets, and if you hit on one, everybody think you know what you're talking about.
You're a genius. Yeah, that's very true. You don't get any press for picking whoever else picks. That's for sure.
Now we talked enough
about Jersey and Rangers, right? Is that where you want to go, Mike?
Yeah, I was gonna say we talked enough about Toronto, Tampa. So
let's talk about Jersey and Rangers, because this is a totally crazy, fascinating game to me. Like, I have no clue. If I was to bet on this game, I have no idea how this is going to go, because the Rangers dominated in New Jersey. New Jersey seemed to get their composure and got back to the kind of New Jersey that was beating up on the Rangers in the regular season in New York. So I lean towards New Jersey a little bit in this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. Like the Rangers are the better team.
Yeah,
and I like New Jersey's talent better,
right,
but it doesn't feel ready yet.
Yeah,
it's a little undercooked.
Yeah,
but I like how they're playing, and they look inspirational. Like they look like they're figuring it out as they go along, and so like I think this is a coin flip. I don't know, man. Like this is hard to figure.
If I was to pick this series again right now, I would have a really hard time with it. Like I just don't have any idea. And yeah, I'm with you. I think the Rangers' experience will win out in the end, and Shesterkin is obviously one of the best goalies in the world, but New Jersey has had the Rangers number, which was the fear going into this. I mean, the Buzztron picked New Jersey to win the series. Remember that? I don't know. I certainly didn't. I picked the Rangers to win the series, and I really just.
Well, I see. The thing is, for Shesterkin to be, and he hasn't played badly in this series, but for Shesterkin to be the difference, your team has to score. And I mean, they scored in the 2 games in New Jersey. They scored 5 goals in each game. But then in games 3 and game 4, they scored a goal, and you can't unless you're Dominik Hasek and you can win 1-0. You got to score more, and they weren't able to have a lot of success at MSG.
You're getting attacked by wasps, Mike? Is that what's happening?
No, they're making a smoothie.
Yep. I was going to guess 3 things: either smoothie, or somebody was drilling on someone's tooth, or you had a construction project going in the back room.
There is a construction project back there behind the blue tarp, but they said they weren't going to be doing anything for an hour. Apparently they lied, but I think it was a smoothie.
Having spent 3 years in my life touring bookstores, playing in a quiet folk rock band, I should know the sound of an espresso machine when I hear it. I knew it wasn't an espresso machine. So yeah, smoothie. There you go.
Yeah. Like, speaking again, just random thoughts here. I've spoken eloquently, I may add, about how everybody woke up on a Tuesday and decided they liked tilapia. Nobody ever heard of it.
Yes.
And no one had ever heard of tilapia, and everybody woke up and said, let's order tilapia when we go to the festival.
Right.
The same is now true for pomegranates. Movies.
Yeah.
Like, I believe that was a Wednesday, maybe a Thursday.
Yeah.
But everybody got up and said, let's put pomegranates in every smoothie.
Well, no, I'll go down this road with something else, Kev, because I saw this trend like 3-4 months ago at Starbucks. Everything was pistachio cold brew, pistachio frappuccino, pistachio coffee. Everything was pistachio. It's like, okay, is pistachio the new pumpkin spice?
This is how I feel about avocados, by the way. I think avocados as a child were considered disgusting fruit. Disgusting.
Yeah.
Things.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I was just having a random conversation with someone, and in the middle of this conversation, he said, I don't like avocados. I like it. And I said, excuse me? So I was wondering, do you think I'm the only person who doesn't like avocado?
No, I hate avocado. I hate the texture. It's disgusting.
Do you like guacamole?
I hate guacamole. Yeah. I despise it.
I only like guacamole for the other things that might be in guacamole, but the avocado texture and the greenness of it all doesn't really thrill me. It's like kind of one of these things. Okay,
well,
right.
You know Mike better than that. Like Mike, just like sports teams, like with food items, like I've been only eaten with Mike, maybe 6 times, 8 times, I don't know. But one thing that's really clear is that either he likes something or he absolutely hates it. Like you should hear him discuss ketchup.
Oh,
I have never, ever, ever had any feelings about ketchup whatsoever. Like I'm just totally unemotional about
it's
ketchup.
it's not not limited to ketchup. It's ketchup. It's mustard. It's relish. It's most condiments. I just no.
Ketchup is the
Can't-
second most used
Like
condiment.
there are a lot of people who don't like condiments, Mike, but nobody gets as carried away with it as you do.
Well,
Like,
no, because
I'm a
most
passionate guy.
people love
You
ketchup.
could- you could give a keynote address on why you hate condiments. I mean, you could.
Yes, I could.
You could speak passionately, and when it was done, like everybody would think, they're like snakes, they're evil,
Snakes
So
not evil. Some of them are just
And
jerks.
the funny thing
they're
is, that,
misunderstood. Snakes are misunderstood. Is that what you
my
said?
son has a video that says snakes are not evil. Some of us are just jerks, which I think is a perfect way of putting it.
Yeah, I just wonder. My wife thinks they're misunderstood because when they show up at our house, she goes out and chats with them. So
Yeah, no, they're.
I do not talk with snakes.
no, you can't go there.
Oh wow, we got to steer this ship back.
Yeah, let's get back. Okay, we
I
got
don't know how we can. No, but we're pretty good. No, I think this is this series. I don't know. Like my gut tells me that the Devils win tonight, the Rangers win Game 6, and then who knows? Like my gut feels like this shifts from that home series to like now teams win it in our home ice once, but I don't know. It's like momentum. It's crazy because they're playing. It's the weirdest series to be a part of, I'm sure, as a player, because you're literally driving to both of the games, right? You're driving to both of the places.
Yeah. What, 14 miles apart, or is it 8?
Yeah, 14 miles apart. So it's like,
yeah.
I mean, that the lack of traffic that the lack of travel the Metro Division has, is definitely an advantage as time goes on, versus like a Western Conference team. I mean, if the Islanders were to win the next series, whoever wins this series could play 2 playoff series, half the playoffs without leaving their house. Like, that's
they'll just play on video games because it's
just playing. Yeah. With staying in their own bed for all that time, and it's kind of crazy. Like, I don't know. Again, maybe the Devils are doing that thing where they stay in a hotel, or the Rangers doing that thing where they stay in a hotel. I don't know. Sometimes teams like to do that for the playoffs anyway. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I predicted the Rangers to win the series. I think the Rangers will still win the series. I'm a little disconcerted the fact that they didn't at least split at home. But I think that the thing here again is, I mean, Schmid played well in the 2 games at MSG, but he really wasn't tested that much. And that's, I think, the concern of Gerard Gallant is that really his offense has been, in the first couple games, it was mostly the power play, and he's got to sort of break through. That's why he mixed up his top 6 forwards. So I think he's looking for something to break loose. And, for my prediction to be right, they should be breaking loose tonight, but we'll see what happens.
Gallant's kind of playing against his old Vegas team here in some ways. Like this team, that's what the Devils remind me of. They remind me of like that because they play so fast and they play so quickly, and when they go north-south, the Rangers can't keep up. And that it's pretty clear that they shifted from east-west to a north-south game in games 3 and 4. This is Gallant kind of invented this style. Like this is like, I mean, not invented, but just like perfected it in Seattle and in Vegas. Sorry. But yeah,
But I mean, New Jersey is the faster team, and Ruff has been able to institute a defensive scheme in the past when he was with Buffalo. I just think the Rangers are better, but I mean, like we've said many times, the better team doesn't always win. So,
that's true.
It should be a disaster and a half though if the Rangers don't.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's just throw that out there because this is a definite Rangers going for it type scenario. And if they don't get out of one round.
Right. All the assets they spent to get Tarasenko and to get Kane.
Yeah, I mean, and that's all true, but I think people understand. I mean, by people, and not that the ownership is not going to be unhappy because they would, but I do think there's a greater understanding now on how easily that can happen.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, we just know that. The matchups are so tight. The Metropolitan,
If you're the Rangers and it happens by way of the Devils, Kevin.
No, I mean, I do get it. I mean, you're right, but I just think there's a higher degree of understanding about that, and I don't know if there's a greater tolerance for it, but they certainly understand how that can happen.
There is no team the fans would rather not have.
No, I mean, you're right.
They've made fun of the Devils. They've mocked the Devils. I've been in the arena for Devils Rangers games. I've been in New Jersey for Devils Rangers games where the Devils fans just mock the Devils fans. I mean, the Rangers fans just mock Devils fans in their own building.
Oh, yeah. because there's more of them. Yeah,
exactly. Usually there is, and it's insane to think that if they lose, I mean, there's so much comeuppance the Devils have going for them here if they can win this game.
Now the other game tonight is Vegas Winnipeg, and I'll say, well, Vegas should win this and close out the series because Winnipeg probably doesn't have Scheifele, definitely doesn't have Morrissey, but I would have said that about Florida, and look what happened. So you can't say for sure that it's not going to go back to Winnipeg for Game 6.
This is a shame. This is a shame to me. I think the Morrissey loss is just bad.
Plus, I just don't think, of all the teams in the playoffs, I think I just have less faith in Winnipeg than any of them.
Yeah.
I just from watching them this season, they just didn't seem to have it. Whatever.
Nobody playing in the playoffs, Kevin, played worse for stretches than Winnipeg.
They had the worst. They had the worst.
Right?
They had the worst February and March of any playoff team, and only got in because they turned it on in the last 2 weeks of the regular season to sneak in.
The thing about them was when they were good, they were really good.
Yeah, at the start of the year, yeah.
And at the end of the year, they were really good too. So, I felt like if they could beat this team, I thought they would have a legitimate shot, because they play Edmonton really tough. I thought they'd have a legitimate shot on Edmonton. Like I really did.
They got a goalie. They got a goalie.
Right. But I mean that's what they need tonight. They need what Bobrovsky did last night. They need that tonight.
One final note here, just for amusement purposes. Chris Johnston just tweeted out that if you want to watch the Leafs try and close out the first round series live tonight, the cheapest ticket for Game 5 on StubHub is an obstructed view ticket for $600 Canadian.
Wow. 600 Canadian. That's like $150 American, isn't it?
It's just Monopoly money, though. Just Monopoly.
Do you want to lose viewership in Canada?
I'm just kidding. That was a joke. That was a joke, Canada. I'm sorry.
Start making Justin Trudeau jokes. Come on.
That was a joke, Canada. I'm sorry. Not being that.
Yeah.
No. But the price falls where it will, right? Like Kevin, that's what it's.
Yeah, no, I mean 600. Actually, I thought you were going to say 1,000. I really did.
I was thinking 1,200. I know. I was thinking.
But it is what it is. If you want to go see the game, and there have been times when I would have paid 600 or more to go to a game.
Well,
600 for a first round elimination game is a lot.
That is true. But
the reason is because they think in about 4 days there'll be another elimination game.
Yes, you got to hold back money on that one.
For that, exactly.
Yeah,
that one will be higher, but or will it be? See, now games. That's interesting thought on that. Game 7. Will prices go up or down, Mike? Because at that point, I don't know. At that point, if you've lost Game 5 and 6, do you really want to be winning?
No, they're going through the roof. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's almost a game I would not even want to watch if I was a Leafs fan.
Here's the interesting thing, Kev. I just saw on like one of the TV screens in the media room. The New York Knicks won a playoff series for the first time in I think a decade, and there were people that went out in Times Square or someplace in New York with the Knick flags, and everybody was celebrating. And I'm wondering if the Leafs actually win tonight, whether there's going to be that kind of reaction in Toronto, because it's just been so much just the angst and frustration. It might be in Maple Leaf Square, but I don't know about like people dancing down the streets on Yonge Street. I don't know
if our readers are any indication, it will be everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like I had a friend who went to a bar the other night for Game 4 in Toronto. Just like the game was not in Toronto, they were in a bar in Toronto, and she said that it was nuts, that it was absolutely insanity, and it was nowhere near the arena. It was like way down.
I do understand that. If the Lions ever win a playoff game,
that's true.
People will be excited. They might hold a parade. They might hold a parade if they win it.
Kev, I know 2 reporters, one of them who's been on our show, Joe Yurden, who are big Lions fans, who are very enthusiastic about the fact that the Lions have 2 first-round picks.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And there are rumors about them going out and trading for like Trey Lance or trading for a quarterback. And, I don't know if that's true because they have golf.
The difference here, Mike, is the difference of a Torontonian and a Michigonian. Because
I know
a Michigan person is eternally optimistic. The panel here is we have the perfect example right here in front of us. Kevin is the optimist all the time. thinks this could be the trade chair. No problem, no question about it. Not worrying about the history, not worrying about the past. This is it. They got it down. Mike Toronto is dominating, or perhaps winning games they never should have won before. And you're like they're still going to lose.
Consider where I've grown up. 4 straight Super Bowls losses, home run throwback, wide right, 4-1 in the third period, Game 6, Gretzky, high stick, and Gilmore. I could give me $1 for every miserable loss that my teams have had in my entire friggin' life. Are you kidding me?
What does that create, Mike? A Yankees fan. Just say it.
Well, I am a Yankees fan, but they haven't made the World Series since 2009. So there you go.
Yeah, but you saw winning with the Yankees.
You saw the Yankees win.
Not enough to make
that.
that.
The Yankees win again if they'd never seen salary cap things in baseball. All right, that's all the time we have. I think we're good. Mike, enjoy your night. Kevin, you as well. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will all be back here again. Well, some of us will be back tomorrow. I don't know. Check out tomorrow. We'll see.
Just end the show.